Hi, I'm Lauren Selden, and today I'm going to teach you how to embed metal into a wax pattern in order to embed it permanently into the metal once we have done lost wax casting. So in this particular case, I'm using nickel silver scatter pins. These are often things that you'll see for tie tacks. And the only reason why this works where I can embed it into the wax pattern and have it inside the kiln melting out and everything is because of temperature. And so nickel silver, the melting temperature is 2030 degrees Fahrenheit. And whenever we are burning out the kiln, the highest that our burnout kiln is getting to is going to be 1350 Fahrenheit. So the melting temperature of the nickel is higher than both of those things. And also, whenever we start to inject with centrifugal force the metal into our flask later, the melting temperature of sterling silver is the 1640, and then the melting temperature of bronze is 1945. So both of those are going to be lower than the nickel silver. Only negatives that I would say about embedding these in the wax is that one, they could fall out, which is not a big deal. You could solder it later. Two, if somebody has like a nickel silver allergy, maybe you wouldn't want your findings in a sterling silver piece. And then maybe the last thing that is a little bit problematic is that it does sharpen the tip sometimes a bit, especially the higher the melting temperature of the metal, like with bronze, it could sharpen the tip of it as the metal is flowing over and past the nickel silver. So those would be like the only reasons not to do it. But it's kind of helpful. And this is not really something that generally people teach you how to do because it is kind of defying the way that we are usually working with our waxes. So make sure that you're taking all safety precautions whenever you're working with these materials, and make sure that you're following the guidance of anybody that you're working with or that's instructing you in that space. So ventilation is key, and making sure that you're doing things safely. So let's get into it. I'm going to get a more detailed shot of just my hands so that you can see how I'm getting the pin to just fuse into place in the wax. So I have a couple of my wax patterns here, and then the nickel scatter pins that I'm using are here. The ones that I'm using are 5/16 of an inch long. That's talking about the length of the pin portion. And then each one of these has a tiny little end cap to them, or pin post, so that you have like a place where you can really fuse. So here I have an alcohol lamp. At home, sometimes I don't want to go to the effort of getting my denatured alcohol in there, and so I've even done this by just lighting a lighter and using the heat from the lighter, and that works as well. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to my left side here, and then I'll get these available right here. So here's my wax pattern. This is where the sprue is going, and so if I'm going to make these brooches, this is like a little swimmer doing the butterfly stroke, and so I'm going to put the pin back coming straight out of the back of the head here. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple versions of this. I'm using self-locking tweezers, and I really do like this, but it does mean that I have to keep my hand really steady. So I'm going to try to do it in a way that you can see it in the camera. So the first step is that I'm heating right at the source of the heat here. And this just takes some practice to see how hot you need it. And you don't need it raging hot because it can just go right through your wax pattern. So you'll kind of get the hang of it after you've done it a couple of times. And then sometimes if I've got a little trimmer, I might lock my other hand in place with my finger. And so right now I'm watching that wax fuse, and I can see that basically like it looks like I've welded wax all the way around the pin, and then now you can see that it's steady. I've still got my third hand there, and so I just have to hold still for a second. So let's do another one. And then maybe we'll try to zoom in even more so that you get the point of contact. So again, I heat the little pin end cap of the pin back. And then I've kind of locked my fingers in so that it can't accidentally push all the way through my pattern. Once the wax is molten, just sitting still and letting that fuse in place. So that one you probably could see I was trimming just a little bit, which it can happen. Obviously be aware that your self-locking pliers are hot now, so you can see I'm not touching the tip of them. Once you've done it a couple times, you'll get the hang of it for how long you need to keep it in the heat, how long you need to hold still. Okay, so the next step in this is considering how to sprue these works. So same rules apply where you want to get the pattern needs to be roughly the same thickness. You know, we're going to put the heavier patterns at the bottom, but for these are all going to be the same pattern. So I'll just show how I'm going to sprue this work. And generally, I'm going to sprue from the bottom first. And the only thing I have to think about here is how this will lock into the investment. So if we're thinking that this is the bottom of the flask rubber base, so this is the bottom and this is the top, if I put it this way on an angle, so I still want it on an angle for casting and so that the bubbles go out, but if I put it this way, then the pin back is in there and it's not going to go anywhere because once we go vertical, it would be like this, and so it wouldn't drop out. If I put it this way, then once the wax burns out, then it sometimes is hard for that pin to hold into the investment once you've put it into the kiln and the wax is burned out. So you do want to think about gravity for these pin backs, and so you need to place them in this direction so that the pins are all going down whenever the flask is sitting this way to let the wax flow. So I'll show you a finished product in a second so that you've got an idea of what I mean by that. So if you were still going to use your lamp, I'm getting my dental tool nice and hot. And I usually would probably switch to a wax pen for this, but this works really well and I already had it out. So I usually grab a little bit of sticky wax and make sure that you're using ventilation for this. And I usually put a little bit of sticky wax on that blue wax. This yellow sprue wax I think also doesn't quite stick as well as the old school kind of red softer wax. So I usually put a little sticky wax first, and then I'm going to attach my piece, and then I'm going to smooth out the connection, and then I'm going to keep building my tree from here. So again, it's on an angle and the pin back is down. So we'll go ahead and do another one. Again, sticky wax has tended to be pretty helpful for getting a good bond. All of these materials can be bought from your jewelry manufacturer. So sticky wax is just called sticky wax when you go to order it. I have to stay pretty still on these parts so that the wax goes ahead and cools. Even if you're tempted, don't put the wax in the refrigerator or don't try to speed it up. Just let it cool. So now I'm fusing that connection, and then that looks great. If you're curious about how the patterns worked, I have other videos that are how to make a rubber mold, which is what this started as, and then how to use a wax injector to get multiples, which is what these are. When you're considering how much space to leave, remember that there needs to be 1/8 of an inch away of space between each pattern. So I'm definitely fine in that department. And then eventually when you put it in your flask, you want to be 1/4 inch away from the side and 1/2 inch away from the top of the flask, meaning that you have 1/2 inch of investment. Make sure that there's a good amount of space so that that investment can dig in for those pins. Everything looks good. Everything's still on an angle. So to show the tree again, you can see that this would be the bottom and this is the top. So the wax would melt out this way. And because I put them facing down, they'll be able to dig into the investment, and then they won't just fall out. So if it was the exact opposite and this was the top, if I put those pins in, the investment would barely be holding on to those pins and they could just slide right down whenever the wax is burned out. So you want them to be facing down. Still have those patterns on an angle, 1/8 of an inch away from each other. So I've grabbed a flask and I just make sure that it is tall enough so that I have 1/2 inch of space to the top of the flask. And I just weighed my wax. Make sure that you remember to do that. With this, if you accidentally forgot, since I have the wax pattern and I have multiples of it, if I really had to, I could just weigh the wax afterwards and then multiply it by how many I had. But I always make sure to weigh the wax, and then I usually take a picture of it on the scale and write it down so that I've got two options there. So I'm heating the wax that's inside my rubber base. Place it inside. And again, start to fuse the wax. And I do want to smooth out the connection between the wax and the sprue or the tree in order to make sure that that metal is not immediately getting jarred whenever it goes in. So I don't want like a bunch of bumps and texture on my wax. I just want it all to be nice and smooth so that once it burns out and once the metal is flowing in, it has nothing that's disrupting it before it gets to the metal or to the pattern. Okay, so that is done. Now I need to invest. I'll burn out and then I'll cast tomorrow. So again, let's take one more look at this. There it is in the base. So you can see the little pins are here facing down. So again, once we invest, then we take off the rubber base, the wax will pour out this way. So that'll be all stuck in the investment. This is one that I cast in bronze, so you can see the pin is stuck in there. And then when you look really close, you'll see a little mound of now metal that's blocking the whole pin and locking it in place. And then you can also tell that it was placed vertically, and so these pins don't fall out. And I do wiggle them, and I make sure that they're really in there. And if they did have a little wobble to them, I would solder them in. But I do want to make sure that they're really in there. So the trickiest thing now is cutting these off of the sprue without poking yourself. And then any finishing things, remember I cover up those tips with like masking tape if I'm going to put them in the tumbler, because they will scratch each other. So you just realize that you've already got your finding on there whenever you're getting ready to clean them up. So that's what they look like. Good luck.